Hello and welcome to the Tiffany Marie Brannon Show. I'm Tiffany Marie Brannon, and today we are joined by Hillary Fordwich. She is a Newsmax contributor, a Sky News Australia contributor. We met doing GB News together. She's a mom of three. She's originally from Surrey, and she is currently living in the States. She also is the president of the Strelmark company, and she's a brilliant businesswoman. Thank you so much for joining us, Hillary.
You're absolutely welcome. An absolute pleasure, Tiffany. It was lovely being on set with you and GB News.
It was brilliant. You're brilliant. And you have so much to say about so many different topics. So I'm really excited to sort of dig in. We can talk politics, we can talk culture, we can talk longevity and life and what it is to be a woman, especially in today's day and age. And I think like one little jumping off point we can start off is kind of goes into all of these things is what just happened this morning in the UK with the legal immigrant that had stabbed Rhiannon White, who was a hotel worker, 23 times and killed her in 2024. There was a sentencing this morning, or I guess in the UK time, that was announced. Just kind of talking about, we have Minneapolis going on right now in the US. We have everyone's freaking out about immigration. Everyone's trying to push back. We have the protests. We also have dozens and dozens of women who have been victims, both in the US and the UK and in Europe, frankly. And you think of like Irina Zarutska, you think of Laken Riley, you think of all these women that have been, really failed by their governments allowing illegal immigrants in. And kind of I think that might be an interesting place to start, just looking what's happening in the UK, looking where the US is at, and looking at the similarities and really what that might predict going forward.
Gosh, yes, Tiffany, I think you're absolutely correct on many points. There are so many similarities about what's happening in both countries. We can put Laken Riley, if people in the UK haven't heard of her. She was a young woman who was attacked and murdered by someone who was a legal immigrant, released in New York City, caught and released. He had a long track criminal record and then went down to Georgia and killed Laken Riley. And there are many, many other names. And I actually think we should all remember all the names of all the victims. And I can't, and I'm sure most people can't. There are so many of them. And yes, exactly what's happened in the UK with Rihanna, her being stabbed 23 times. And this immigrant, she was taking care of this immigrant in this immigrant hotel.
Really?
Yes, he was. So the hotel is funded by the British taxpayer. They're given free housing, free food, free meals.
Of course.
Actually, I saw an interview where one of the networks went, I think you believe it was actually GB News, which I'm on regularly, interviewed some of these migrants because they were actually these illegal immigrants were protesting the fact that they didn't have enough video controls for the Xbox that was in their room. There were 5 of them in a room or 4 of them in a room.
You've got to be kidding me.
There were only 3 Xbox controls, and that's what they were protesting. And they didn't like the food. So anyway, and there's these centers. And now what they're doing in the UK is they're actually, because there were so many protests outside of migrant hotels, and there was a particular place in Essex, and there's just been one in East Sussex, because of these protests outside they're moving them to these army barracks in East Sussex. But because when they're in a concentrated place like a hotel, people know about it. What they're doing now, the government is doing, is they're divesting of these investments in the big hotels, and they're putting them into private rentals, which will then put more pressure on the housing market. And you're seeing similar things here. I'll tell you when I knew President Trump was going to be elected. And this was the first time around. There was an immigrant center in a city I'm sure most people in the UK have heard of Chicago. And there was a city this incident in Chicago where they were housing illegals, giving them 6 months free food. They were giving them free housing. And at Thanksgiving, the local population in Chicago, which is predominantly Black, poor people, went to the center just to ask for a free Thanksgiving meal, and they were turned around. And I'll never forget, on Fox Business News with Stuart Varney, and somewhere I could find the clip and send it to you, Tiffany, so you could give it to our audience.
Yeah.
But there's a clip, and he's interviewing this Black councilwoman in Chicago, and she's saying, "I'll never vote for a Democrat again." And
Wow.
this is see turning. And the other thing is there's a lot of funding for all of this that enough of it hasn't been uncovered, but a lot of funding. It's the Catholic Church, the churches have taken a lot of government funding to promote this and to house people. And that's both sides of the Atlantic. This is a movement, both sides of the Atlantic, and the parallels show that this isn't an isolated instance. This is a planned approach. And it's basically, sort of like the denigration of the West and the killing of Western culture.
Yeah, I mean, agree with everything you said. And, you see that. I mean, we saw that in New York with the Roosevelt Hotel, which I used
Yeah.
to walk past as a kid. And it was too dangerous for me to walk down Midtown because I was too scared of getting chased or spat on or attacked by the massive group of illegal immigrants that were being housed there. But, you know, there was something I literally saw last night because we both know I don't sleep. So I just sit there all reading things all night. And it's estimated $14 trillion of a sort of shadow, like unregulated government branch that deals with all the NGOs that is unaccounted for money
Yes.
over the last, however many years. And those NGOs like literally have zero, there's not even a byline. There's not even an itemized line for where that money goes. And we know now, especially uncovering the kind of fraud we've seen in Minnesota, that's over $9 billion, which I truly believe, on a side note, is why, we're deporting people all over the US. Why is it only Minnesota that's magically and suddenly
I
happening?
always say it's the D word. It's the Democrats' deflection. That's
Yes.
what it is. It's deflecting from this massive, massive fraud. And actually, this is speculation. And I normally like to stick to facts. And I do a lot of research like you when you say you don't sleep. And we have to talk about sleep and health because I've got to rectify that with you about something. But um, I know I could just never sleep, but then we'll talk about the importance of sleep. But just going back to the deflection, I think this is something that you're going to see more and more and more of. I bet, and this is what I think is speculation, that when Tim Walz had that conversation with President Trump, and they both said, "Oh, it was a very good call," there must have been a deal done. Something like, you want to win the midterms, and I don't want to be prosecuted. He said he's never going to ever run for office again. I bet you, and this is just speculation again. I'm going to caveat that there was some kind of deal done that he wouldn't go to jail and be prosecuted if he just never runs again and he tries to help stop the protest there. But you're right.
You mean Tim Waltz?
Yeah, Tim Walz.
Yeah.
You're right, Tiffany, that there's been deportations in Texas, in Florida, in Tennessee, all over the United States, and even in actually blue run cities like Washington, D.C.
Yes.
In Washington, D.C., Mayor Bowser has actually worked with ICE for these deportations of the illegal criminals, and we haven't seen these protests. So you're absolutely right about that. Something else I'd just like to mention. Don't forget, President Obama and President Clinton, between them, they each deported. President Obama, just in his second term alone, it was 2.98 million, nearly 3 million. President Clinton, just in one of his terms, it was 1.47 million, so nearly 1.5 million.
Yeah.
So far in President Trump's term this time, it's only been 125,000. It's a fraction of what Clinton and Obama, the amount that they actually deported, but it was never, ever used and weaponized by the mainstream media the legacy media that you're seeing at the moment here in the US.
And what I heard this morning that was really disturbing is that right now the Democrats, so we have the bill that is to keep the United States government open, that needs to be passed.
Yes.
And the Democrats have been pushing back.
Funding bill. Yep.
Yes. And the Democrats have been pushing back on that because there's a $10 billion amount set aside for the Department of Homeland Security. Now,
Which is training and ironic. If they really believed in this, we need more training. Right?
Thank you. And also, not everything that DHS does is deport people. It doesn't all go to ICE. These people, and
Right.
they're also completely forgetting the fact that we already have $75 billion locked in until 2029, thanks to the big, beautiful bill. So it's
Yes.
kind of just complete
And they voted
lunacy.
for it before, and the Democrats have voted for it before, which is hypocritical. And Chuck Schumer has said that shutting the government down is totally and utterly unacceptable and morally wrong. That's what he said previously when they were in when they held the
But
White.
to that point, something that I saw a thing with Chuck Schumer this morning, and what was really interesting and terrifying, honestly, is that they're coming to the deal to extend it like a stopgap measure so that this will be continued for the next 2 weeks. They'll keep the government open for the next 2 weeks. But what they want to do and what they're looking at doing, according to the reports, is changing the way the warrants are issued so that, you have, I think it's like a administrative warrant versus a federal warrant, a judicial warrant. And every other president has been able to just get the administrative warrant for the issuing for the deportation of the illegals. And those just go out. If we are suspected of being illegal, they go out, ICE can go find you. The other warrant has to actually come as if you already did a criminal, as if you were a criminal, that we all know you did it, and you're being, issued by a judge. It's signed in a very high procedural way. And essentially, it also would require the United States to offer them a free public defender. So it's completely insane what they're trying to do to push back against this. And we look at these young women, we look at the Laken Rileys, we look at the Rhiannon Whites, both, in the United States and the United Kingdom. And I can't get my head around, why is it that other women, specifically a lot of white liberal women, of all ages, I mean, we're seeing them a lot older and we're seeing them a lot younger. I feel like there's a little gap in the middle with Gen X and some boomers and a little bit of the older millennials that are not totally crazy. But why is it that these women can turn a completely blind eye to the murders of these young girls, women? I mean, the rapes of children. I think of Rachel Morin, mother of five, whose head was bashed in. She lost 45% of her brain matter while being
Yeah.
raped repeatedly.
Yes.
Why can they turn a blind eye to them and not to the illegal immigrants that are here illegally and committing crimes?
Well, it's selective outrage. That's what it is. It's just political outrage. That's all it is. Because obviously, you're talking about innocent people where this happens, and then you're talking about criminals where this happens. There isn't any logic where you can actually justify this. I will say, going back to my point about the Catholic Church funding a lot of this and the churches taking, and I remember there was the Washington Cathedral, that's the Episcopalian church here, where they remember when the minister there, the archbishop, was terrible to President Trump because he was talking about cutting all this funding,
Yes.
going to them, and Doge cutting it, and all the
And the
abuse.
woman went off about how evil he was, like, during the middle of
During the
event she
middle
was
of
attending.
the
Yeah.
service, right. So a lot of these churches, obviously church attendance is down, and maybe they need to make all this money. But so I would actually use that as an example as well, in the same bracket of, like, so they're saying, I mean, I'm assuming, I don't know, I can't speak for the churches, but their justification, like the justification for, it's not just women, but predominantly women that have these sentiments for the criminals, they couch it as compassion. And yet, like I said, it's selective outrage. Whereas if you're compassionate, then why don't you have that be ubiquitous? It should be consistent. And that's my thing. And with everything in life, actually, I just can't bear hypocrites. It's one thing to have your set of beliefs or your values, but it's very hypocritical. Now, you asked me, getting back to your question, why? I don't know the exact reason, because it's all over the map. All I can say is I can label it as selective outrage.
Yeah.
If I knew why, I would actually try to solve it. And I don't think anybody really knows why. And I haven't heard any logical justification thus far. And when you looked at what just happened in Minnesota with this nurse, this man, Pretty, where at first the left-wing legacy media was saying, oh, and one actually network, I think it was MSN, literally said he's the kind of guy that you'd want your daughter to date and marry, and he was literally the perfect role model. And then
And they photoshopped a picture of him to make him look way more.
and they photoshopped the picture. But then I believe it actually was the BBC, which is normally way left of center. I believe it was the BBC that had photo recognition
Yes.
recognition software, where they actually found from a documentary that had been made on another subject, I believe, that Pretty was kicking and spitting at an ICE vehicle. So again, I think that you're seeing selective outrage. I think it's a great pity. I don't like to see this in our nation. I think that at the moment, it's so important, everybody, to be resilient, to stay logical, to stay calm. All I would ask for is calm, and let's get a list of values. Do we want criminals? Do we not? Do we want, and I think taxpayers also, I'm surprised more taxpayers aren't more outraged. I think we are inside, but I would just never protest. I think President Nixon referred to us as the silent majority. I would never protest and go and kick someone's car and do anything like this to legal authorities. But I am livid inside about what's
Yeah.
happening with my tax dollars.
And
And
I
in
think,
England, I know they are with the tax pounds.
yeah. And, I was even reading about Oxford becoming a 15-minute city and the different taxation and fees and fines that's going to come associated with that in the UK. But I think you really hit on that point of resiliency. And my personal opinion, and this is a theory that I'm floating out, so you can tell me what you think about it, is that feminism, it destroyed women from pursuing their natural endeavors, right? From getting married, from having kids, from being sort of the softer sex. And it forced them to become very hyper masculine, and there's more childless single women now than ever in the history of our nation, probably of Western civilization, the world.
The world.
And
Actually, in Japan, they have a terribly low birth
yeah,
rate.
we have a
Yeah.
massive population decline
Yes.
worldwide.
Yes.
And when you women are inherently more emotional, we are the softer sex. I do believe that while we're equal, we are different and we are
Although
given.
women have a higher threshold for pain than men do.
Yes,
That's a
absolutely.
scientific fact.
Yes. I mean, I trust me, there's
But
stuff that
but I
I've
don't think
done.
it's just it's not just childless women, because I know people that have children that feel exactly this way. So I don't think it's
Yeah.
that. I don't believe it's that. I think it's I don't know the answer. So I'm just now, again, let me always couch when I'm speculating. I speculate it's more to do with the polarization of media. For example, I remember when the Gulf War broke out, I was heading global business development for KPMG worldwide. I was based in Amsterdam, and I remember coming home at night and watching CNN, and I thought it was just the news. It was the news about the Gulf War, and CNN was started to be a news network. And I think back in the day, years ago, I really couldn't have told you what was a left-leaning network and a right-leaning network. The BBC was the bastion of just,
Yeah.
you know, sent news, like news. It was just
Yeah.
news. And the BBC has become obviously decidedly left. And I don't like regular news about law and order being couched as right wing, as if you're, a Nazi and a Hitler. No, I think that where is the center? And actually, I always used to consider sort of Bloomberg was the center, and then Bloomberg, he gave 89 million to Democrats, and then
Yeah.
CNBC, somewhat. Fox Business News, CNBC is a little bit left of center. Fox Business News is a little bit right of center. People like to say that GB News in the UK is right wing. I don't really find it right wing. It's in terms of its logical, sensible, common sense laws. Who would say, I have a family, a children, a home, and I want an illegal to kill someone in my family? Not really. And yet they support these policies. So it's selective outrage, but there's also something polarized in them that's come, I think, has been fed by the media that's need to garner a support base.
Yeah, I can totally agree with that point because I was just on a plane yesterday, 2 days ago, coming back from Mar-a-Lago, and the female stewardess, a flight attendant, she's a beautiful young Black woman, having a great time. She's super funny. She's 24. We were talking, and she's sitting across from me and, dealing with some difficult customers that were sitting next to me that were complaining about everything. And she's just handling it really well. And I was like, you're handling this way better than I would have. I'm like, God bless you. And so we start talking, and I had a jacket on, and what I hadn't told her is that under my jacket, I have my ICE immigration.
You didn't take that jacket off on that plane. I'm
Well,
seriously, on
so
the
what
airport.
happened,
I would worry.
I had not had my jacket on when I was walking through the airport. So I have my big navy blue gold letter ICE shirt on. And you know what? I'm very proud to wear that because I want them to, like, to support ICE publicly because they are given such a bad rap. And what was crazy was I had gotten men come up to me and say, "Thank you for supporting immigration. Like, what do you do?" I said, "Well, and I told them I'm a political strategist. I've worked in border immigration. I helped rebrand DHS to make America safe again, and all that kind of stuff." I try telling the stories of Americans that are adversely affected by failed immigration policies. And all the men were like, "Yeah, I'm so excited. I want them out of my country." And I had women my age, women your age, women younger, older, all the women were the ones giving me the evil glare, the eye. This one woman was sitting
Wow.
across me. She was recording me like I'm an idiot. And I ignored her for about 5 minutes, and I finally look at her and smile, and she would like laugh, and I go, "Oh, do you want a picture?" And she goes, "What? What? I don't know, what?" And I go, "Oh, no, I know, like, you're recording me, so do you just want a picture with me?" And she goes, "I wasn't recording you. I was recording." I go,
Yeah,
"Really? Are we gonna do
I
this?"
did. The only
And
thing
so
I would Yeah, go ahead, go
well,
ahead.
so I put my jacket on because on the plane 'cause it was cold, and so this stewardess and I were having this great conversation for about 5 hours, and when we landed, we were talking about the immigration stuff about stuff, and the woman that had been recording me walked past, and I was like, "Oh, that's the lady that was mean to me." She's like, "Yeah, why was she mean to you?" "Oh, 'cause my shirt." She goes, "What was your shirt?" And so I unzipped my jacket, and she goes, "Oh my gosh." She's like, "Oh, wow, I didn't see that coming." And I go, "Oh, do you have any questions for me when it comes to immigration that I can, like, help answer?" She's like, "Well, I just get my news off of, like, media, and I'm young." She was actually really wise about it. She said, "I know I'm young. I know I don't know all the facts. I wanna take it all in, but from what I see on TikTok or online, it seems really evil and awful. And I'm going, this is the
And
problem.
one of the things I've said is that President Trump didn't just beat Joe Biden and the Democrats. He beat social media
Yeah.
and the legacy media because it's this pushing. So if you click on one thing that's left, that entire feed will be left out.
Yeah.
So you don't get to see, and there's nothing that gives you this. And I think, unfortunately, even young people, they think they're Googling something, they're getting information. You cannot. Do you know you can pick any subject on the face of the earth? You will not get a news outlet. You will not get ever GB News. You won't get Fox Business News.
Really?
When I was covering, this is how far back it went. When I was covering Brexit for Newsmax, Brexit, you ready? In the US, you could not get anything here other than The Guardian, the BBC, the jobs that were going to be lost, the disaster was going to be, and everything. So you're not Googling things. Audience, you're not Googling things. You are left-wing propagandering
Yeah.
information. That's what you're getting. The only way to find out what's going on is if you know how to reverse engineer it. You type in Fox Business News and you type in something that's being covered, or GB News and something that's being covered, or Newsmax, something that's being a topical thing. And then a lot of times the algorithm won't even give you the current information. It'll give you like something from 3 years ago. If you put like Fed chair, Fed chair, it might even give you something, even though it was announced this morning that Walsh is the new Fed chair, it might even give you something from 4 years ago. It won't even give you current news.
Which
So
is crazy and
it's
exciting.
totally biased. So for young people and these young women, I actually have empathy for them in terms of that they just don't know. And also last but not least, in terms of just, this is different in the UK. In the US, one of the reasons Americans generally don't know what's going on in the world, it's not that they're stupid people. I'll never forget when my cousin used to come to the US, and actually there's no more quintessentially English name than Nigel Fordwich, but he would come to visit me. And in those days, back in the day, again, when media wasn't as polarized, they used to have the Washington Post. And I'll never forget, he opened up the paper, and on like page 4, it used to say world news. And it was this little column, and there'd be like an inch, and he'd say, oh, the rest of the world is an inch today. The rest of the world is 2 inches. If you walk out right now in Washington, D.C., and you can find 100 Americans that are highly educated with graduate degrees and ask them, even who's the Prime Minister of England, I don't even know if they'd know it was Keir Starmer, but ask them name a member of the royal family of any other country but the UK. They wouldn't be able to name them. They would not be able to name Olaf Scholz. Ask them about Friedrich Merz, the Chancellor of Germany.
Orban.
They would not have any idea. They would not even know. And when I came to America and emigrated, I'll never forget. So this was the late 70s. When I was going off to university, there was actually a college freshman study. And I read about this in actually getting on a plane going to the UK because it was my high school graduation present. And I read this in an English newspaper. 83% of American college graduates. So bear in mind, this was the late 70s, early 80s. Think about how close that was to Vietnam War. 83% of American college freshmen on a blank global map could not put their finger on Vietnam, on the UK, and wouldn't know in the US where New York was versus Washington, D.C. was on a blank map, because they don't teach geography even in school here.
They don't teach history. They don't teach literature. They don't.
Right.
So, I mean, we used to have every single man, woman, child, whatever, growing up in Western slave, we used to know 2 things. Didn't matter how rich you were, how poor you were, how well off you were, what your job was, where you came from. You knew the King James Bible and you knew Shakespeare. And that provided a foundation of understanding history, of society, of the language, of virtue. And then that kind of was the foundation for everything else. We don't do anything. Do you know that 96% of all required reading in the United States was published after the year 2000?
And this is how I know. I have 2 sons that went to the same prep school, right? That I single mom, and I actually made sure that I put them into what I thought was the best education, right? And then when I was in a relationship with somebody, he had a young son, so he went years later. So 3 in different eras went to the exact school. My eldest son, summer reading, ready? He had to read a book a week for the whole summer. Otherwise, there's no way he would have got through that list. And it was all the classics. You had Shakespeare, to your point. That's what made me think of it. Shakespeare, You had Shakespeare. I think there was even Churchill on there, but there's definitely Plato's Republic.
I think de Tocqueville is usually pretty
Yes,
common.
de Tocqueville, Machiavelli. There was
Yeah,
Jefferson.
probably some Plato, you know, maybe
Plato,
the
yeah,
Federalist
all the classics,
Papers.
all the classics, and there was a couple of like modern books which I can't remember. That was him. Okay, he graduated from that school. Ready? He went there in 08, graduated in 12. Then my second son went there and graduated in 20. He had to read a book every other week or he couldn't keep up. So they'd already halved it by the time that he went. And there were a few classics on there, right? I think Plato's Republic was on there. I know there was Shakespeare. When this other boy went from this other relationship that I had, he is graduating this year. There were no classics on there. It was a few books. I think 2 were mandatory. This is going to actually make me cry. I think only 2 were mandatory. And definitely one of them was written by, and now I'm so sorry to our audience. I forget because I like to be factual, but I wasn't prepared for this topic to come up. But I forget the name of the congressman, but basically it's a black congressman in America, and it was all bubbles. It was like a cartoon book, and it was
What?
fair. By the way, I don't mind that he had to read from a congressman a left-wing book. Fine. But my point was, if you're going to have someone read,
Yeah.
so make it mandatory, so far left, why don't you have something that far right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't ever give them a Ku Klux Klan book to read, for goodness sake. And so there's this lack of balance. And I actually had a run-in. Don Lemon was just arrested last night. I had a run-in with Don Lemon, who tried to get me on reparations. It was actually, I think it was trending number 4 in the world.
I remember this.
Yeah, 89 networks covered it. And because I brought up a fact, which was that the British stopped slavery, were the nation that stopped slavery, but also it was the black African kings. And everybody listening, if you want to know anything about slavery, read about Mansu Musa, read the book Barracoon, which was about the last African prison. And there is still slavery in this world today. And anybody who feels seriously about slavery, don't use your cell phone ever again, because most of the parts in it come from the Uyghur slaves. And that's a whole other subject I got onto. But comes from people not being edified and reading the right material.
Yes, absolutely. And I mean, it breaks my heart. You think of the indoctrination, because controllable people are an uneducated people. And there's I was just talking to Father Ben Keeley recently, and he was on a recent episode, and he had this quote that I love, which is, ignorance and indifference are allies of evil.
Oh, I love that quote. Say that again for our audience and for me so I can remember it.
So he says, ignorance and indifference are allies of evil.
Ignorance. Now, the only thing I would say is the indifference part doesn't account for Minnesota, what's happening all these while. But the ignorance, absolutely. And who was it who said this again? Sorry.
Father Ben Keeley, who I adore.
Okay.
He works with the Nazarene. He founded the Nazarene. So he goes in and tries to help persecuted Christians in the Middle East and abroad, and does a really incredible work trying to, help them set up small businesses, and just is such a voice for the voiceless, instead of running away and fleeing, to stand their ground and to really try to make a difference. Because if we just leave every time we're persecuted, then we create vacuums. It's why what happened to the Middle East happened in the Middle East. And, I'm terrified about what's happening to Spain. Their royal decree is going to give the 500,000 illegal Muslim Islamic immigrants, citizenship, apparently. So why did they fight for 700 years? That I'm not sure. I'm not sure. But, and that's really what it is when you make a society ignorant and you destroy education at the very base level, you destroy the future of any goodness, truth, and beauty coming forward. C.S. Lewis wrote about this in his book, The Abolition of Man, and he warned. I mean, he was so prophetic. He warned back in the 50s and 60s that, hey, there's this little green book going around that wants to completely revolutionize education and the academic system. It's evil, scary. You need to be very aware of it. It's introducing this thing called relativism, saying that there is no such thing as goodness, truth, and beauty. And it's going to, walk away from all the classics, walk away from anything that has been foundational to Western civilization. And that's really what's happened. We can predict prison beds and how many. Then this is what states do.
They do. I know what you're going to say on how many children can read in the 3rd grade.
Yes, it's literacy levels.
It used to be six American states predicted how many prison cells they needed to build, and now it's more states. But you're absolutely right. You're the first person, by the way, for our audience. Tiffany is so well edified. No, but you're the only person I've ever talked to that actually knows that fact. That's right. So it's so important. And actually, this is what now we've got a lot of UK members in our audience as well. I know Americans love Princess Catherine. It's another reason Princess Catherine has it right in that childhood education is so important. One of my fears, though, is what are you educating them with? Tying this together with my point about the Google, you can edify people a lot. So it's not just ignorance, is the information. I would actually correct, sorry, but nearly I would actually correct him. It's not just, are you being edified with biased information, which is another thing that's frightening about AI. When people were putting in about, should I vote for Kamala or President Trump? Because there's whole reasons.
You're in my brain, Hilary. You're in my brain. That's where I was going. I was like, because AI gets 80% of its information from Reddit, from those.
Well, and it's programmed. That's why I was saying earlier that President Trump didn't just beat Biden and the Democrats. He beat social media and AI and all of the legacy media because people are being programmed with this. And I would say, by the way, and when I mentioned earlier about when I used to get the Washington Post, I had never, by the way, for our audience, there was a point in time I'd never even heard actually of Fox Business or Fox. I just hadn't. And that was, I'll never forget, I was golfing on a Saturday morning and this men were the three men I was golfing with were talking all about Benghazi and what had happened and how terrible it was. And I was like, what? Mainly because the media that I was watching and reading, I didn't even know what had happened because they didn't cover it. And that was like, oh, you have to watch Fox Business. And that's when I started watching Fox Business. So that would have been, whenever Benghazi happened. And now I forget the year.
2013?
Before that.
Was it before that, 27?
I don't remember the year. Yes, but this would have been somewhere around, somewhere around there. Yeah, I don't remember the year.
Yeah, and that's the reality is that now we already are dealing with kids that are the loneliest generation that have as you and I have discussed this, they have the highest suicide rate ever in what is it, the history of humanity?
Well, in all of evolution. So we've been here something like 2 million years. Let's just say 800,000 years since Neanderthal, real humans as we think of us, since Neanderthal man. In all of evolution, this is the safest we've been, with the most food, with the easiest lives, with the lack of disease, with the healthiest. But there's the highest suicide rate ever recorded. Part of it, I think, actually, is people have the luxury of time. We all live like kings now. Just think about it. The reason we have very sophisticated fingers and hands is we were foragers for the best part of 800,000 years. If you put all of evolution into 1 year, we live like the last second of the last day. We've never evolved to have 3 meals a day, nor to basically be sitting around. So I'm not a psychiatrist or psychologist, but I do think one of the many reasons probably we have such a high suicide rate is when you were worried about foraging all day long to try and find a berry because that was basically your meal, you didn't have the time to think, dear, about all these, like, when they talk about first world problems, I call it the luxury of today problems, because you had real worries like, am I going to find a berry or I'm going to die?
Yeah, and we due to technology, which, thankful that we can do this, but also how is it worth the cons, really, is that people are inundated with more information than the brain can process on a daily basis. I mean, we have more information on a day than every other previous generation had in years, in decades, in lifetimes.
Yeah, that's
and
absolutely
so,
right.
so you think about that, you think about what screens, I mean, I love Jonathan Haidt and what he does on this in terms of children with screens and social media, how it destroys your neuroplasticity. It creates really wonky pathways. It's why so many kids, and I can go on all day about how I think China is deeply responsible for what's happening through TikTok, through creating.
Oh, and you do know with TikTok, do you know in China that 98% of all people under 20, what they want to be? They want to be scientists, or they want to be what is it? Scientists, or
astronauts or
something.
I saw this too.
Because TikTok programs them to want to learn, and 97% of all those under 20 in the Western world want to be influencers or
famous celebrities for nothing.
It's because of what they deliberately have been programming differently.
Yeah, and the algorithm's completely differently. It's completely different, and you can even see actually that what we know as TikTok is not even what's allowed. Like, they're not even allowed to have those apps on their phones generally, like in China. And
the silly leaping around and dancing around, the brain rot stuff.
Yeah.
Well, and the English word is rubbish.
It is. It's complete rubbish. I'm here for every English word ever. But it
I don't watch or read or consume any actual rubbish. If you get on an airplane, and I'm getting on an airplane tomorrow, this is the thing, Tiffany, in the United States, and actually most of the airlines, and actually it's a while since I've flown British Airways. I can't speak for British Airways, even though I have family members that work there. Sorry, but I usually, being in the US, I fly US Airlines. Get on any American airline, 99% of all the movies, in quotes, entertainment, it's all complete rubbish. No history, no actual facts. There's so much to learn in our world. And I'm always looking for a documentary. I'm looking to learn something, any degree of truth. And it's complete rubbish.
You know, was a great documentary is the new
Tell me.
documentary that American Principles Project just put out. I was just at the premiere. Terry Schilling produced it. It was inspired by his incredible father and the work that they were doing. It's called Fathers Wanted, and it goes into the problem of a society without fathers. And it actually, that's where I learned that statistic about how the Chinese want to be, you know, engineers and astrophysicists. And
Oh, wow.
because
Tremendous.
so it's yeah, and so that's a good one that's coming out that you should watch, but generally speaking, it is all such rubbish,
It's
and
rubbish.
reality television,
Yep.
we've rewired our brains to
Same with
only
television. If you go down the guide, it's all rubbish.
and it's only we're only able the girl I talked to last night, a really interesting girl, and she was just at the place I was at, and she said she realized that she was unable to sit through a full film because she had become so trained by TikTok that she physically could not sit through a movie anymore.
But
And
without looking
that's
at her phone.
and that's
Gosh.
when she said, "This might be bad, I might have a problem." And then
Right.
but generally speaking, for example, you know, I work in media and politics, I post my stuff on Instagram or TikTok. My stuff has been shadow banned anytime it deals with something dealing with this subject, where I'll go from thousands of views to 0 views
No,
or
no,
more.
right. And by the way, on that note, people even think things like LinkedIn is a business network, right? Just a business network. If ever I post that I've been on Newsmax, literally, it's actually kind of like it squashed me. I did something I was a keynote at a charitable event. And they do a lot in the diversity area, but I really believe in what they do for veterans. And it's a great organization, ESA SEALs. And I had like over 800 views and then all these comments, hundreds of comments. And then if you post anything on a Newsmax, then you just get literally your
Yeah.
squash. And they've done this. And I've had many friends. I'm quoted a lot about the royals on Fox. And
We
then
can
this
talk about
thing.
how much we hate Meghan Markle all day long if you want.
Well, I don't hate many people. I don't hate her. Actually, I will say
Loathe her?
I
I
think
love her.
I think she's extremely intelligent. I think she's attractive. I think she's slim. I think she's got a lot to offer.
You're
What
so
I
nice. You're so much nicer than I am. I think
no,
she's a manipulative
what
narcissist.
what I think is sad more than anything, I'm upset and sad that she and Prince Harry, who was second in popularity per YouGov, only to our beloved Queen Elizabeth, that they squandered what that popularity and squandered what they could have done, not just for the British, but also for the whole Commonwealth. What actually it could have done for the world. And what I say is how pitiful that they've gone from having literally the world at their feet and what they could have done for the Commonwealth to trying to flog jam.
It really
It's
is.
sad and
It's
pitiful. I think
so
it's sad and
it's
pitiful.
so much worse when you say it out loud because I already watched her try to sell this jam and jelly, and I'm going, is this
Well, put it this way, it's a crowded space anyway. And then when you're not making it yourself and you actually really can't cook, because I had to for my meat for what I
Did you
do.
watch
Watch this,
the Netflix?
I had to just because I was covering it a bit and I couldn't go any further, which I think is what
I couldn't
they
get through
actually
it.
there's a term. It's why the viewership was so high for the first one. There's a term and it's not called like lurid watching. It's not called hate watching. There's a term and I forget it, sorry, about what you do when you watch something which you don't like, but you're doing it sort of like voyeuristically. Anyway, I had to watch it just to endure it. But things like, you know, with her bare hands fiddling with her hair and then putting her hands in the fingers of the
Yeah.
things that everybody who's ever cooked anything knows you don't do. I put my hair up in a ponytail when I'm
Yeah,
cooking,
I
and
have like an apron. I look like I've been through it. All right. There's flour.
yeah.
I'm a mess.
But
My
the
skin is
things that
bad.
us moms, and I've been a single mother. I mean, single mothers may be a bit different than her. She's much more affluent than I am. But I know what it took. I mean, the things that you did quickly. It's another thing. I have tons of tips on how to raise healthy children. But the things that she was saying that you do, no mother that I've ever met, and I'm not poor. I just was a single working mom, but working, and no poor person's going to do it. Certainly no middle class person like me with raising children alone. And actually, affluent people have people that do it for them. So there's
Right.
not for any target demographic.
Right. Do you think, which kind of circles us back to an interesting point, because Do you think that it is the separation of, because back, like you said, most normal people are a little more hands on if they're home, but if they're working and they're gone, then there's kind of a gap between their kids and like their kids' nutrition or their kids' health.
No excuse
And
for it. No excuse for it whatsoever.
there's no excuse, but
No.
that seems to be a little way that, red dye number 4 or whatever got into our system and
Well,
really created
no.
such an unhealthy thing.
No, I remember when we emigrated to America, I'd never had a soda. And again, my
Really?
wasn't pouring no, no, no. And we had a
I live
garden.
on Diet Coke, it's my vice, I
Don't
know.
touch it. Tiffany, stop now. Stop
I
now.
just
Seriously.
give me an
You
IV.
can't,
Just
you
give me an
can't,
IV, plug it in.
no, you can't even pronounce the chemicals in it. That's how bad it is. If you
I
need
don't wanna know.
caffeine,
That's why I look
no,
so young
no,
because I
no,
get
no, no, no.
disturbed.
First of all, you would never take those jars of chemicals and put them in your body. You wouldn't do that.
We
So
don't know that. I'm crazy. We don't
you
know
would
that.
okay, so what you should do if you need the caffeine, I've got something brilliant for you and our audience, and I don't have a stock in this company and I don't own the company, but somebody years ago, many years ago, I saw at Whole Foods super coffee. No, I'm a sweetaholic. It has no sugar in it, no refined sugar, high in protein, and they have different flavors. Like they have hazelnut, but they have mocha, they have
Huh.
latte. It's got the caffeine. It's delicious, high in protein, which you should have. Good for hair, nails,
What's it called?
bone density. It's called super coffee. And
Super
you could go
coffee.
super coffee and there's zero sugar, but it tastes sweet and it's got caffeine in it. Obviously it's caffeine. So
I
it's a
better be caffeine because I live on caffeine,
no,
okay?
no, no, but that's what you need to do. And if you, I need to make mention, sorry, now everybody in the audience is going to cringe because I'm going to sound like a nag, and I'll actually tell you, one time I was on the golf course with my eldest son. I taught all my kids to golf, and I'll never forget these two young chaps were smoking, and I was banging on at them about the fact that every cigarette shortens your life by 8 minutes. Didn't you know this? And at the end of the hole, my eldest son comes over to me and he says, "Mommy," in his American accent. He says, "Mommy, not everyone wants to be mothered by you." So, in other words, I'm sorry if I'm mothering you and members of our audience, but mention sleep. Let me tell you this.
Yeah, because I don't sleep.
No, listen. Very important. Margaret Thatcher and Tiger Woods both trained themselves. There was an era, and this was like in the 70s and 80s, trained themselves to only have 3 hours sleep. And I took those role models and thinking, wow,
I'm pretty sure Donald Trump does the same thing. The
he
man
does the same thing.
the end
So I
sleeps 4
trained
hours, and
myself to have
Winston
so
Churchill
little.
too.
Like Winston Churchill trained myself to have so little sleep. But now, literally every study, I've done a lot of research on this, does say, you look at when Margaret Thatcher's horrific dementia, and they do reckon Tiger Woods, the fact that he was driving and that's where he wrecked his leg, something's a little wonky. And I do think, I know President Trump doesn't drink. I agree with that. He doesn't do everything right because he eats all that fast food. That's why he's so
And he loves Diet Coke just like
and he
me.
loves Diet Coke. But really seriously, there's different charts for how much sleep you have, but getting anything less than 6 hours sleep is not healthy. And you're having too much caffeine, which is pumping you up, which is why you can't sleep. And 6 hours sleep enables you still to be massively productive. So I get 6 hours sleep. But they say 7 or 8 or 9 is more important. But I'm too busy to get that much sleep.
No, I mean, I do agree with you. The guy I'm dating, he's very good about his sleep, and he's teaching me to take melatonin and stuff, although I'm really bad about it.
Now then you're doing 2 drugs. Now, actually, I will say, if I can't sleep, and I've just recently gone through some hell, I was taking a lot of melatonin. Melatonin is natural, and it's better to take melatonin. Never take a chemical, never take any of the drugs that doctors prescribe, ever, because they're addictive and they have side effects. Melatonin is the best one. But the most important thing is cut down on the caffeine, Tiffany, because then you're more likely to become more naturally tired. And at night, all my lights.
But I'm always tired, Hilary. Then I'm just tired every day, all day.
Because you're not getting enough sleep. So we're gonna do both. You're gonna wind down on the caffeine.
Before Thomas Edison invented the light bulb, do you know how many hours a night the average human being slept?
Well, I bet because now we're going to go back to my thing about evolution. If you ever wonder what the healthy thing to do is, you have to go back to what came naturally.
With your circadian rhythm, with the rising of the
sun, the rising and the falling of the sun. Yes,
sun is in my face over here. I'm screwed. But yeah, it was 11 hours.
That doesn't surprise me. In the winter, now in the summer, it's tough in Northern Europe because it's light so early and there's so little sunlight. There's very little sunlight in the summer in Northern Europe. But yeah, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah, 11 hours. So we went from 11 hours to, I mean, if you're me, it's like 3 if you're lucky.
Well, as Benjamin Franklin said, and he was talking just about men, but this is about humans. Early to bed, early to rise makes the man healthy and wise. I say early to bed, early to rise makes you healthy, wealthy, happy, and wise.
That. I
And
love
that's another thing. I'm a really, I've gone through, as I mentioned, sheer hell just recently, by somebody horrific, debauch, his
I'm so sorry. I mean, and
illegal
I
behavior.
something I really love about you is how much we have in common in terms of our personal
Brazilian.
trauma and resilience. And resilience is the key word.
Yes.
I
It's
think, yeah, I think that as a woman in 2026, which I still can't believe it's 2026, there's so much to be said for especially women in our space. There aren't a lot of women in our space, to be honest. Conservative politics has been predominantly male forever. And especially women that have traditional conservative values to also have the wherewithal and the fortitude to to weather these massive storms of life, these tragedies, these setbacks, these unexpected heartaches and griefs, from divorce to child loss. My sister, I know you've lost children, my sister has lost a child. My grandfather had a stroke. I went through a horrible unexpected divorce, and it's just you never know what life's going to give you. I think being resilient, having that character of resiliency, that's what it so often comes down to. And Angela Duckworth wrote that book, Grit, which I talk about sometimes, which is great because I think by grit, she hints at resilience, but I think resilience is a much better word. But
Yes.
what would you say in terms of, your own life story and what it's taught you and how that shaped your views on things, your identity, how you do the job you do, what you speak on.
Well, first of all, I think that I would say to every member of our audience and to you, they say the only things in life that are definite are death and taxes. I say that life is going to be a roller coaster. I don't know how high your highs are going to be or how low your lows are going to be or when they're going to come, and no one knows. But every member of our audience has had some degree of loss, and or hopefully not many people have had some of the tragic things that you and I have had. I've had 3 dead babies. I was divorced, and somebody that I really loved, although we are on very wonderful terms now, which is lovely. I've maintained probably every relationship that I've ever had, friends with their families and things. So unlike, actually tying this to Meghan Markle, unlike I haven't destroyed all those relationships. I'm friends with
We
family.
haven't just lit it on fire and thrown a
No,
match.
no, their families love me, which is lovely. Uh, but I have gone through something recently with a man that with his incredible debauchery, and he was arrested, for drunk driving, and he's been behaving absolutely horrifically. But then I do think so in terms of resilience. Some people take it out on others, and I actually remember Marcus Aurelius, who said, I don't remember. Sorry, I don't remember him. I never met him. No, sorry, that sounded funny. I'm not that
Is this in meditations or
yeah,
different?
not that old. No, he said, great men are tough on themselves, small men are tough on others. Now, he wasn't just, I think, whether he was
Oh,
talking about height, but he was talking about the kind of small-minded person. But it does account for some people like Putin and Napoleon. But this particular chap, his mother had been raped by a priest when he was young, and he had a half sister he never knew about. And he came home as a teenage boy and found his mother in a massive lesbian orgy. But I just kept like being nicer and nicer and more understanding to him. Meanwhile, he was doing horrific, illegal things behind my back. But I don't want to go more into that. What I'm going to
mm.
say to the audience, that's just to give you a degree of some, I've been dealing with horrors. But what's really important in terms, I think, of resiliency is everybody has a different way of coping. Okay. Everybody has a very different way of coping. I'm not going to preach what I think is important and tell everybody it should be that. But these are the things I think it's difficult to be resilient if you don't do. In terms of health, I think it's so important not to turn to anything that's going to be mood altering. For example, if you turn to alcohol, it is addictive. It's the only toxin that is certainly in the US that the FDA accepts as a regular sort of.
Right.
It's a toxin. It's a
We
drug.
actually will admit that one. We won't hide it under whatever
No,
the
but I again, I have red
I'm
wine on my
kidding.
counter. Like I'll have a little bit of red wine, and I have friends over, and I have a little bit of red wine. It's more important as long as you don't let it rule you. You have
Right.
to just as you have to recognize it and give it the respect that it's a drug. I think it's lovely. I love a bit of red wine, particularly because it has some resveratrol in it. But I think you have to just recognize and acknowledge it's a drug. There may be some time where you're like you have a great party and you want to have a lot to drink. Okay, but then you have to recognize it's a drug, and the not can do it consistently. Very important is sleep, but also to be hydrated and have enough water. And remember this about evolution. Again, we've been here like something like 800,000 years. In all of evolution, we have sophisticated arms and fingers because why? Because we were foragers. So you've got to think about what came naturally to mankind? Mankind literally did not have 3 meals a day. We didn't have processed sugar. We did not have any processed foods, no chemicals. We
Right.
were eating nuts and berries, a little bit of protein maybe, and basically all the fruits and vegetables that come naturally. If you can't name the tree or the plant, or animal, don't consume it. And somebody once said, in America, there's an expression, I always read the label. And I say, don't read the label, because anything out of a packet. If you don't eat anything out of a packet, you're fine.
That's so true. And
And
now
when
we're
your
able
body's
to,
healthy, you can be more resilient because you have that energy. Sorry,
and
Angel.
now we're no, you're fine. Now we're linking autism to processed foods. We're linking ADHD. We're linking all kinds of things that we've now slapped a medication on for and medicated mostly children for. And we're finding like, oh well, maybe we shouldn't be poisoning them with their food and beverage. Maybe that would be a good place to start.
Well,
But
the chemical companies, and the chemical companies give the chemicals to the pharmaceutical companies that fund the medical schools where the doctors prescribe a pill for an ill. Do you know what percentage of I can't speak for the UK medical schools, I can't. But in the US, do you know what percentage of American medical schools have any classes on nutrition?
oh gosh,
It's
I'm
something
gonna do how
it's
many?
7 or 10%, something like that. And what percentage have any mandatory classes on nutrition? It's something like, and again, this varies in terms of state and school. It's something like 2 or 3%. It's under
That's
5.
crazy.
So they don't have any classes on nutrition. And I'll never forget, there's a book, I think it's Atlia who talks about, is it Live Forever? I wasn't prepared to talk about this book, but he wrote a book, I think it's called Never Grow Old. I think that's it. And he says he was a medical student and his grandmother got really sick and died. And he loved his grandmother and he wanted to, Peter Attia, he wanted to, how did he prevent her from dying? Obviously, she was old, she was going to die, but I think it's Never Grow Old or Never Die is the name of the book. But one of the things he said in there, like every other night, they had state dinners provided by pharmaceutical companies. They were all pharmaceutical companies. Pharmaceutical companies would come in. He said, but where was the broccoli industry that came in and talked to them? They didn't. They didn't. And I'm not blaming doctors. I'm not blaming the medical system, but we don't have a medical system in the US. We have a
It's
sick,
broken. We have a
we have
sick
a sick
system.
system.
Yes, that's correct.
Only
And
about 21% of your health is your genetics. Like I have terrible bunions. I can't cure those with anything to do with nutrition because they were inherited from my mother, right? So 21% is just the way it is. You're a beautiful, full, blonde lady, shorter, darker. Like the genetics mandate that. The rest of that, 100% of the 80% is in your control. It's what you eat, it's how you behave, and it's lifestyle.
yeah, and so much of it's prevented. I mean, we are just now finally getting into the space where we're starting to talk about prevention and metabolic health and your glucose levels. And we were told for so long that salt and butter are bad, and now we're like, oh wait a minute, look, the food pyramid is actually reversed. I mean, they just revised the food pyramid. Thank God for Bobby Kennedy. I don't know what we would do if Make America Healthy Again movement had not come along and really started changing things in the United States. But I mean, to that point, do you wanna know the percentage of Americans that are on statins?
My gosh, I know since three-quarter are obese. I bet it's a majority of those three-quarters.
It's over 50%.
There you go.
It's
Yeah,
almost
and
60%.
I
Almost
never take.
why is half of a country, half of the world's leading superpower, why are half of them on statins for high
And
cholesterol?
three-quarters obese, and
Yes.
it used to be two-thirds were obese, and then something like 20% of the remaining third were overweight.
Well, and what do statins do? They cause blood pressure problems, then you end up on blood pressure medication, and then that causes erectile dysfunction if you're a guy, causes other problems if you're a girl. So then you are dealing with erectile dysfunction medication. And then we also know that the gray matter of your brain, or all those cells, that's cholesterol. Those are every cell in your brain is coated in cholesterol. So when you're taking anti-cholesterol medication, research is coming out showing that it is directly linked with early onset dementia, Alzheimer's,
Maybe that's why they're protesting in Minneapolis.
I
Now
mean,
we found the reason for why all
genuinely,
those women are doing what they're doing.
it's all that and maybe like the purple hair dye. I think maybe it like seeped in to their brain on some level. But no, it's this very very you cannot disconnect the person mind, body, soul, spirit, right? I feel like so much of humanity, especially non-Western cultures like China do this, where you're a meat popsicle. And that goes into kind of the communist, perception of a human being. But to be lucky enough and blessed enough to have been born and raised in freedom in a free country. I mean, I don't think I can really call the United Kingdom that anymore since they're arresting over 12,000 people a year for social media posts. But back in
Yes,
the day when we had
yes,
freedom in Western civilization, you recognize that the human person is it's a holistic being. You are one complex thing. You cannot just segregate a person into a sum of their parts.
correct.
And looking at why the protests are going on in Minneapolis and why we're having a population decline and why we have a high suicide rate and why we are unhealthy, these are all inherently connected. And I think that's what this show is really becoming about. It's becoming about how to live life well and how to be as fully human as you possibly can in the short and precious time that you are here on earth.
Yes.
And to devolve or detach ourselves from the reality of that these things are all inherently and intrinsically connected and touching each other, it makes us just a little less human, and it makes us a little easier to conquer and divide and to be angry and to really take it out on each other instead of recognizing that we're all in this world and we only get one life and we better make it count,
Yes, and
you
and
know?
be kind and accepting of others, and I think again, abide by the law or don't abide by the law. Who wants a completely lawless society? So when you
Yeah.
pick to let people that the very first act they do when they enter the UK on the small boats, or the very first act they do when they cross the border here, if the first act someone does is illegal, what is the likelihood that they do something illegal? I always say that, when I golf, they give you pencils for your scorecard. I even wondered, can I take the pencil home? Is that allowed? Like I
Yeah.
so you have to be. I know what my family went through to go through the immigration process here. So I know that a lot of legal immigrants like me feel very strongly about this. And that's a miscalculation actually the Democrats made. I think they think of all illegals in the same, immigrants in the same bucket. No, there are illegals.
Yeah.
I have nothing against immigrants. I'm an immigrant. I have nothing against people that tend to migrate. But I think you either say you're a law and order society or you're not. And I think the people that are accepting of illegals, do they really want their house broken into? And again, to my point I made earlier, do they really want a member of their family killed? I don't think so.
No, and I had a Colombian Uber driver on the way back from the airport, and he loves that we're deporting people. He says, "Do you have any idea how
He's
hard it
like,
was for
he's
me
the
to
same
come to this
thing
country?" He's like,
because he's legal. He's legal.
but
Yeah.
you know what he also said, which goes to our other point, is that he said when he came here when he was 17, he's now almost 30, he was shocked at how bad the education system was, that he was in high school and he was learning stuff that he'd already learned in Colombia in primary school.
Well, and
And
I
he
was put
said,
ahead a year in school. Excuse me. I was put ahead a year in school when I came here. I was put ahead a year in school as a little girl in England. I was bright, very bright. But then I was put a year ahead in school again here. And I graduated university on my 20th birthday.
"Did you really? Oh, I'm so
I
jealous.
was
That was, like,
20.
my dream." Oh.
Yes, yeah.
See, you're so smart, Hilary. But, that's really it, and you look at I mean, ironically, we could probably blame the Russians a little bit for our lack of education. I'll tell you why, because we had a classics liberal arts-based education for since, like, America was founded, right? Well, what happened? The Department of Education was founded due to Sputnik going up, thanks to the Soviet Union in 1957. And when Sputnik went up, we all kind of panicked and we're like, what are we teaching our kids in school? How much science and math are they learning? How are they going to be competitive when it comes to the space race? And so that's when you really see this massive shift from, the classics that we're talking about that really do actually educate you, that have educated us for thousands of years since Plato, since Aristotle, since Marcus Aurelius. And we transitioned into a lot more STEM focus because we wanted to be competitive. I mean, it's no different with what's happening with like teaching kids coding over great books or how to use AI over reading. The average American has not finished a single book in a year.
That
That's a
doesn't surprise.
problem.
Well, you see the bookcases here. I bought my condo, and no condo I looked at anywhere in the Washington, D.C. region. So this is in quotes. It's not like we're talking about anywhere in the middle of a field. Not one condo had a bookshelf. I built that unit, and that's just some of my books. I had to give most of my books all away. And that's just the historic old, some of them are very valuable old historic books and from my daddy and etc. But yeah, they didn't no bookshelves. And you're totally right. I always say get on an airplane, to my point earlier about all the movies are 99% of rubbish. Get on any airplane going anywhere in the United States, walk from the front, first class, to the back. Try to find someone reading a book. You might
Yeah.
get one or two. You
Yeah.
might get one or two.
And you can and they're gonna be some horrific, like, vampire werewolf love story or
Daniel
some
Steele.
yeah, some I mean, the trash romance novels they're peddling now to even conservative women is just absurd to me, like, the hot cowboy enters town with
Yeah, right.
freedom and justice on his hip, and I'm like, "What are
Yeah,
these school soccer moms in
yeah.
Orange County reading?" I don't wanna know. But, yeah, I think that, if you could talk to the women out there that are kind of searching, maybe whether they're on the left or on the right, they're in the United Kingdom, they're in America, what would you tell them to try to aim for in terms of, this life that we've been given kind of a crazy year so far. We're not even on month 2. Month 2 starts next week.
Right, right. Well, one thing I do think in terms of, let's just address that in components. I think there's different components here. One
Okay.
thing, like, be healthy, because then your mind is going to think very logically. That's number one. But number two, what I do is I do listen to what is left-wing media in the US. I have different networks I listen to because I want to hear a rounded perspective, because you need to make up your own mind. But I think the thing that's very important to always say is, what are my values of the way that I want to live myself? In that, am I listening to what somebody else is telling me that over there is okay, but what would I want in my own home? When you think of, if everybody could personify things in terms of their own home, if all the people that are protesting in Minneapolis would take in these illegals, the taxpayers wouldn't be paying for them. And
Oh,
then
yeah.
the illegals would either behave because they'd be in your home, or they wouldn't, and you would want to get rid of them. So I think always you can personify something in terms of, what would I want in my own home? That's the way I've always looked at it. And everybody's different. I've always wanted to have children. I mentioned before, I've had 3 dead babies. I kept going because I really wanted children. I always wanted a family. I always wanted to have children, but not everybody. I'm not saying that everybody should have children and a family, but you've got to think about what matters to you and what gives you personal joy, and you must pursue it. I happen to love golf because I love walking a golf course. I love the outdoors. That's my personal passion on the side. You've got to think about what really matters to you, and it has to be something that fulfills your soul. A happy person is a successful person. And professionally, I love the coaching and training I deliver, because I'm making a difference in people's lives. I'm improving lives. And I have 2 of my favorite quotes, testimonials are, one gentleman came to me, an older man, and he was in real estate. And he said, "Hilary, if I'd had your session 20 years ago, I would have made so much more money." And then a young chap in another industry, a high-tech industry, he said he was some kind of top producer in that industry, in high-tech, selling CRM systems. And he said, "I went to an 8-hour top producer session in New York, but 2 hours was more beneficial with you, Hilary." Anyway, those are on my website. But my point of this is, it's rewarding to me to coach and train and help others. What's rewarding to you? Just because that's rewarding to me doesn't mean to say you should do it. You've got to find what's rewarding to you. What would you accept in your own home? And definitely be healthy. Those are the 3 pillars I think are really, really important. Without those, everything else, and there's lots of other things, but those are the 3 pillars I think that really matter in terms of what to do with your life. And I do think, I know this sounds very, very old fashioned, be lovely to other people, be embracing of other
No,
people.
I think that's so important. People are not kind to each other anymore.
They're not. And I will tell you, where I'm living now, this condo, this community, we have people that come and shovel this and everything. By the way, those people are just like you and me, just because they're shoveling and they need that job and they're not sitting here on a podcast. And so late last night, I could hear them, and I ran down actually in my slippers and put on like 2 robes because it was so cold to open my door. But I handed them like some things, like some food and some drink and some things for.
Aw.
And like, I was calling across at them, and they turned around like this, because probably people are yelling at them or not appreciating. And they came over the biggest smiles, and I know I made them their day. And just the feeling that I had inside doing something for somebody else. But you know what? I came down this morning and they had shoveled. They weren't supposed to shovel to right up to your door, and they'd done that for me. Like, they didn't have to do that for me. A good deed, and in the Bible it says, "As ye reap, so shall ye sow." Well, it's not for me to correct the Bible. I don't think that's correct. Sorry, "As ye sow, so shall you reap." Sorry, I had it the wrong way around. I don't think that's correct, because you don't always sow and you don't always reap, but you should sow every day. You might reap somewhere. I could give you lots of examples of things that came back to me years later. And if I give you one example, just one example.
Yeah.
Um, Dear friend of mine, we were raising children at the same time, and we were both single moms. And I had a lady who was helping me with my kids, and she had a lady helping her with her kids. And they had this little boy, and I don't want to betray a confidence, but his is a Hispanic name. And this little boy, we included him. He could play with my kids, so he played with all the children. He just played with all the children. Fast forward. Years later, I'm parking my car out of a very famous restaurant. I'll tell you the chain, the Palm Restaurant in Tyson's Corner in America. And one of the valets comes running across to me, wraps his arms around me and says, Miss Hilly, Miss Hilly, Miss Hilly, because he remembered me as a little boy. If I hadn't
No
treated him well,
way.
but ready for this? Fast forward, everybody in the valet line is looking at me like, why is this valet running up to her and hugging her? Fast forward, he became a manager at that restaurant. Up on the walls, they paint your picture on the walls. And the only people on the walls are like Bill Gates, Jeff Bezos, senators, like people that are, echelons above little old me. He one time said, Miss Hilly, give me a photo of you. I want to have your photo on the room. And I'm on the wall, and I have the prime position as you walk in the Palm in Tyson's Corner. And that all goes back to now. Have I reaped everything I've ever sown? Every person I've ever helped get a job? Everybody I've ever helped? No. But you just do the right things. It warms your soul. And if I could say to every member of our audience, as you walk out, if you're listening to this or wherever you are, smile at the next person, the next waiter, the next waitress, the next person, emptying the garbage can in the hotel or the lobby, they're working, they're trying. Just because they're not doing what you're doing, listening to a podcast, doesn't matter who it is. They could be. Do you want to be treated abominably by, in quotes, a CEO or an aristocrat or a royal? No, we're all human beings. Treat everybody in a wonderful, lovely manner, and it might well come back to you in a wonderful way. And if it doesn't, you did the right thing.
Love that. Amen. My mom always said the same thing. She said, you never know what day someone's having or how you might save the life. My mom actually saved a woman from committing suicide in Switzerland once. We were
Wow.
on a bridge, walking across the bridge, and we walked past. She has 3 little kids in tow, and I think we were in Interlaken or one. I can't remember. And one of the lake cities, and we walked past, and my mom goes, "We're gonna go back for a second." And there's a woman just leaning across like looking out on the water, and my mom goes, "Are you okay?" And she didn't really speak English. She started crying, and
Oh.
she was able to communicate that she was waiting for us to walk past, and then she was gonna jump over. And my mom coming back to her saved her life.
Oh.
And I don't know what ended up happening to that woman. I was young, but my mom says you just never know. It's like the idea like angels unaware, right? You never know when you're entertaining someone that, or isn't who they seem to be. And, again, like that quote always comes to mind where C.S. Lewis says, "You've never met a mere mortal." Every single one of us from and he goes on to say like the plumber, the aristocrat, it doesn't matter who you are, like we are all equal. We are all equally, important and equally here and equally created in the image of God. And I love that. So I just want to say thank you for coming on. Thank you for these brilliant
Absolutely.
conversations. I love having you on. You have to come on again. And would you like to tell people where they can find you and follow you?
Oh, yes, absolutely. I don't do a good enough job on social media, but I do have a YouTube channel. I just kind of post my media hits there. And I am on LinkedIn if you want to reach out to me. And my company, as Tiffany mentioned at the beginning, Strelmark, but if you Google my name, it comes up. It stands for how you strategically develop the relationships that market your business for you. I coach and train. I give keynotes on how to gain and retain clients. So growing your business from all my years at KPMG and my years now with my own company, every industry, coaching, training, executives, people, and how you can grow your business. That's what I actually do as a profession.
And you're really good at it. So
Yeah.
if anybody needs something like that, please contact Hilary. She's not only lovely, but she's very, very, very smart. So thank
Thank
you
you. I
again.
love growing companies and businesses. Any retreat you have, any offsite, I'm there.
Hey, don't ask me twice. I'll just sign you up for everything. No, thank you. And thank you everyone listening and watching for joining the Tiffany Marie Brannon show. We hope to see you again. And until then, I'll be nicer if you'll be smarter.